Hey guys, today we're looking at Romans 4, 1 through 8, and I'm going to do our diagram together. And so you guys can just keep following along with the diagrams. I trust the voice reading is going well. If you can, make sure you glance at the discussion page as part of our collaboration together. And part of the course, I'm going to kind of evaluating on your ability to answer questions that we pose in the discussion forum section of the MyUM course page. So make sure you take a look at that. We're almost caught up to the course schedule. You'll notice that I've posted quite a few of the quizzes online, and some of you guys have been submitting diagrams to me. That's great. And we will continue to march on our course. Just make sure you're paying attention to quiz and paper deadlines. Again, that's the main way I'm evaluating your ability to handle and understand issues in Romans, and you need to continue to think of me as a resource in your own education. So this is not a lecture content or lecture style class for a variety of different reasons, but I can help and guide and push you to read different things and to pursue your own education at your level. So please feel free to use me and to help you pursue Romans education. So hope you're doing well. Let's look at Romans 4, 1 through 8. I've broken that passage up for you on the MyUM course page. You can find that there. And give me just a second to pull up there we go. So again, when you're doing a tracing, you want to begin with the most tightly connected, simplest relationships between really dependent or independent clauses. So you're looking for kind of the tightest connections between phrases or that you've broken up, and then work out from there to more broader explanations of how the thought of a passage fits together. So if I'm just looking at this really quickly, I can notice that in verse 2a and 2b, there's a relationship between those two clauses. This is an if-then relationship. So you're looking on your tracing handout, and you'll see that there's an if-then category. So make sure you guys can see that. I've got several things up on my desktop, so make sure you guys can see that. There's the if-then between 2a and 2b. Okay. The next kind of most logical and tight relationship you can find between verse 3, B, and C. I'm arguing that that is an action result. Abraham believed God, and then as a result, it was credited to him as righteousness. So you can see that there in 3C, action result. Okay, moving right along. Verse 4 and 5, I could have busted those up into smaller propositions, but I think it's really easy just to kind of keep this as on a broader level. So if that's confusing, I'm sorry, but verse 4 and 5 I kept as just one proposition sentences just for the sake of ease. And again, you could have busted these up in a bunch of little positive negatives, but I think it's just easier to broaden them out. So relationship between verse 4 and 5 I think is a negative positive. To the one who works, his wage is not credited as favor, just what is due. But to the one who does not work, but believes in him who justifies the ungodly, his faith is credited as righteousness. So in one, his wage is not credited, that's what is due. But the one who does not work, it is credited as one who believes in God as the justifier of the one who is ungodly. So I'm calling this from broad and negative positive relationship. So you can see that there, negative positive. Okay. Verse 7, A, B, and verse 8, I'm just calling this all a series of ideas. So what does David say? He says, blessed are those whose lawless deeds have been forgiven, whose sins have been covered, and whose man whose sin the Lord will not take into account. I just think that's all one kind of series of basic ideas. So that would be a series. Okay. Okay, next. I think that verse 6 is the idea that's being explained in verse 7. So David speaks to the blessing on whom God credits righteousness. That's the idea. David speaks of the blessing. And there's the ground. I'm going to show you what I mean. Where does David speak of that? Well, he speaks of it in Psalm 32. So you could, there's other ways of linking those. You could have said, because there's no explicit linking word. There's not like, it doesn't say David speaks of this because he says, verse 32. So the relationship is just dependent on, verse 6 is dependent on verse 7. So as long as you explain that relationship in a logical way, I'm just saying idea explanation for that one. Okay? Okay, let's look back up to verse 2. And if you notice, verse 2a and b are related to verse 2c in a positive-negative relationship. So Abraham was justified by works. He has something to boast about, but not before God. So he would have something to boast about if he was justified by works, but he doesn't, so he's not. He doesn't boast before God. So it's just simple playing off those keywords, but not positive-negative relationship. Okay. Now we're working our way down. So notice this from your tracing handout sheet, but verse 3a is a question. What does the scripture say? And then it responds by a quote from Genesis 15. He believed God, and it was credited to him as righteousness. So that's a question and answer. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. I like those. Now looking back up, remember verse 3a begins with the word for. Okay, so I believe that Paul is grounding his idea that Abraham was not justified before God by works with the scriptures. So Paul will do this throughout Romans particularly. Right? No, Abraham is not justified by works, for the scripture tells us differently. So that's the nature of that connection relationship. All right. Now we're building outwards here, so the relationships between these clauses is becoming a little bit more complex. Verse 2 and 3, then I'm saying are connected to verse 4 and 5 with an idea explanation. It's kind of the catch-all category, sort of a junk drawer for our way we explain relationships when it's not overtly clear by the syntax and the grammar of the sentences. In other words, I think he's explaining what the scriptures say about Abraham's righteousness. Right? He's explaining the idea that Abraham is justified before God by belief, not works. Okay. So, in other words, I think you might call this a progression in argument, but in other words, what I think he's doing is he's broadening out the implications. If this was done for Abraham this way, here's the idea: if it was done for Abraham this way, then it also, I'm explaining now my idea about Abraham with this, with what is to come here for all of us. Right? If it was true of Abraham, it's also true for us. So there's the idea: justification by belief in God as justifier, the one who has faith in Him, not on the basis of works alone. I'll finish this in the next video.